Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. My name is Jake, or it was. I was 39 years old, and for the last 3 years, I had been relegated to this beige purgatory, a place where field agents were sent to pasture. I used to rappel down skyscrapers and disarm bombs with seconds to spare. Now, my greatest daily challenge was unjamming the photocopier. I stared at the mountain of paperwork on my desk, a monument to bureaucratic inertia. Each form, each report, was a ghost of a life I no longer lived. My fingers, once trained to handle a sniper rifle with surgical precision, now felt clumsy and thick as they sorted files. I was a weapon left to rust in a damp basement. The sense of uselessness was a physical weight, pressing down on my shoulders, making it hard to breathe the stale, recycled air. I picked up a single, forgotten paperclip from my desk. I bent it back and forth, feeling the metal warm and weaken under the pressure. Straight, bent, straight, bent. It was a mindless, repetitive action that perfectly mirrored my existence. Just as the metal was about to snap, the phone on my desk buzzed, a harsh, unfamiliar sound in the cathedral-like silence of the annex. "Jake, Director Thorne's office, now." The line went dead. I dropped the broken paperclip into the trash. It was the first interesting thing that had happened all week. Director Marcus Thorne's office was on the top floor, a world away from my basement dwelling. The air up here was different, cleaner, sharper, tinged with the scent of expensive leather and power. Thorne was a man carved from granite, with eyes that seemed to see not just through you, but through the choices you hadn't even made yet. He didn't believe in small talk. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the chair opposite his sprawling oak desk. I sat. The silence stretched, a tactic I knew well. He was letting me stew, letting my mind race with all the reasons I might have been summoned. Was I being fired, reassigned to an even more remote outpost? Finally, he slid a sleek black tablet across the desk. On the screen was the face of a man named Klaus von Hess. "You know him?" Thorne asked, his voice a low rumble. "Vaguely," I said, my field agent instincts kicking in despite their long hibernation. German industrialist, old money, new tech, rumored to have his hands in some dirty pies, but nothing's ever stuck. "He's moved beyond dirty pies," Thorne said grimly. "He's planning to acquire a series of next-generation kinetic bombardment satellites, off the books, if he gets them. He can hold entire nations hostage from orbit. We need to get inside his operation, find the proof, and stop the sale." A flicker of the old fire ignited in my chest. This was it. A real mission. What's the insertion plan? I can go in as a security consultant. A disgruntled arms dealer? Thorne held up a hand, silencing me. He swiped the screen on the tablet. A new face appeared. It was a girl, no older than 19 or 20. She had soft, blonde hair that fell in gentle waves around a heart-shaped face, wide, innocent blue eyes, and a smile that was both shy and radiant. She was beautiful. The kind of girl you see in magazines. "This," Thorne said, "is your way in." I frowned. "Who is she, a courier, an informant?" "She is Willow von Hess, Klaus's only daughter. She's been studying abroad in the States for the last year, in 2 weeks. She's scheduled to fly home to Germany to spend the summer at the family estate. Her father adores her. She has unrestricted access to the entire compound, including his private study." I leaned forward, my mind already working through the angles. Okay, so I get close to her, seduce her, maybe use her to get inside. It's a classic honey trap, but I'm a little old for a 19-year-old. Don't you think? Thorne stared at me, his expression unreadable. The silence stretched again, but this time it felt different, heavier. "You misunderstand, Jake," he said slowly, deliberately. "You won't be getting close to her." He swiped the screen one more time. My own file photo appeared next to Willow's. "You will be replacing her." I blinked. I must have misheard. The hum of the building's ventilation system suddenly sounded deafening. "I'm sorry, sir. I think I missed something. Replace her as in what? Put on a wig and a dress. That's insane. He's her father. He'll know in 5 seconds." "A wig and a dress won't be necessary," Thorne said, his voice dropping even lower. We've had a breakthrough in Division 7, Project Chimera. It's a form of temporary, targeted biological restructuring. We can't make you taller or shorter, but we can reconfigure certain things. Facial structure, vocal cords, body mass distribution, hormonal balance. It's a total immersion. The words hung in the air, so preposterous I almost laughed. But Thorne wasn't laughing. He was deadly serious. The blood drained from my face as the full, monstrous implication of his words crashed down on me. You want me to become his daughter? My voice came out as a strangled whisper. The room felt like it was tilting. This wasn't a mission. It was a violation. It was something out of a nightmare. I am a 39-year-old man, I said, my voice rising with a mixture of disbelief and fury. A soldier, an agent. How in God's name do you expect me to pass as a 19-year-old girl? The technology will handle the physical aspects, Thorne replied, his tone infuriatingly calm. The rest will be up to you. You were the best deep-cover operative we ever had, Jake. You became the people you impersonated. This is no different. It's just a more comprehensive disguise. No different. I shot to my feet, my hands clenched into fists. You want to turn me into a woman, a teenage girl. This is a line we don't cross, Director. There has to be another way. There isn't, he said, his eyes like chips of ice. We've run every simulation. Every other approach ends in failure and a potential world war. Klaus von Hess is paranoid. He trusts no one but his daughter. This is the only key to the lock. He stood up, walking around the desk to stand in front of me. He was shorter than me, but his presence filled the room. Look, Jake, I know what I'm asking, but I also know you. I know you've been rotting in that records room, feeling like your life has lost its purpose. This is the most important mission of the decade. It's a chance to do something that matters more than anything you've ever done. It's a chance to get back in the game. His words were a carefully chosen poison, targeting the deepest wound in my soul, my pride, my wasted potential. He was offering me a way out of the beige prison, but the price was my own identity, my very manhood. I sank back into the chair, my head in my hands. My mind was a whirlwind of revulsion, fear, and a terrifying, traitorous spark of intrigue. The sheer impossibility of it was matched only by the stakes. The transformation, I managed to say, my voice muffled. It's temporary. You said... Completely, Thorne assured me. Once the mission is complete, a single counter-agent injection will revert you to your baseline state within 24 hours. You will be yourself again. Myself, who was that anymore? The man who alphabetized reports, or the ghost who remembered the thrill of the chase? Thorne placed the tablet back in front of me. Willow's innocent, smiling face stared up at me. My future, my disguise, my prison. You have 24 hours to decide, Jake, Thorne said, returning to his seat. But know this if you say no. You'll spend the rest of your career alphabetizing files on missions you were never good enough to lead. If you say yes, you save the world. He didn't need 24 hours. He already had his answer. He had me backed into a corner, and the only way out was forward, into the most terrifying and unknown territory I had ever faced. I looked from Willow's face to Thorne's. My voice felt like it belonged to someone else when I spoke. Fine, I breathed, the word tasting like ash. I'll do it. I'll become her. The place they took me didn't have a name. It was a sterile, white facility buried deep underground, a place where the laws of nature were apparently treated as mere suggestions. The 2 days I spent there being briefed and prepped felt like a fever dream. I was poked, prodded, scanned, and measured by an army of stone-faced scientists who spoke in acronyms and technical jargon that went right over my head. They were excited, buzzing with the thrill of their human experiment. I was just terrified. The final morning, they led me into the central chamber. It looked like a minimalist operating theater, dominated by a single, contoured chair that looked more like a torture device. Dr. Heiress Thorne, the director's estranged, brilliant, and morally flexible brother, was in charge of the procedure. He had the same granite features as Marcus, but his eyes held a manic, scientific glee. "Ready to become a new you, Jake?" he asked with a chilling smile. "Just get it over with," I muttered, my throat dry. I stripped down to my boxers and sat in the chair. Cold restraints clicked around my wrists and ankles. A female technician, her face impassive behind a mask, started an IV line in my arm. I watched the clear liquid drip, drip, drip into my veins. A countdown to the end of me. "The initial sedative will make you drowsy," Heiress explained, his voice echoing slightly in the tiled room. "You'll be conscious for most of it. We find the process integrates more smoothly that way. Less psychological dissonance if the mind is aware of the body's changes as they happen." "Lucky me," I grunted, my eyelids already feeling heavy. The first sensation was a deep, penetrating warmth spreading from the IV site, coursing through my body. It was followed by an intense, full-body itch, as if every cell I possessed was being agitated and woken up. My muscles began to twitch and ache. A deep, throbbing pain like I'd just run a marathon and been hit by a truck. I groaned, straining against the restraints. "That's the cellular restructuring agent," Heiress said calmly, monitoring a series of screens. "Your muscle fibers are shortening, becoming denser and leaner. Adipose tissue is redistributing. It will be uncomfortable." Uncomfortable was the understatement of the century. It felt like I was being pulled apart and reassembled from the inside out. A wave of nausea washed over me as I felt a strange pulling sensation in my abdomen. A deep internal shift that was profoundly wrong. My waist and hips seemed to be contracting, cinching inward, while a new unfamiliar sensitivity bloomed across my chest. I looked down. Through the haze of pain and disorientation, I saw it. My pecs, usually solid and flat from years of training, were swelling, not like muscle, but something softer. I could feel the tissue expanding, the skin stretching taut. A sharp, tingling ache pulsed through them as they grew, rounding out, forming two distinct mounds. A strangled cry escaped my lips. This was real. This was happening. My face felt like it was on fire. I felt the bones themselves shifting, my jawline softening, my brow ridge receding, my Adam's apple, that most fundamental sign of my manhood, dissolved into my throat with a painful gulp. I tried to shout, but the sound that came out was a broken, reedy thing, halfway between a man's yell and a woman's shriek. "Vocal cords are thinning," Heiress noted with academic detachment. "Try to relax your throat." Relax, I felt like I was being flayed alive. My skin was tingling everywhere, a pins and needles sensation that was slowly replaced by a feeling of impossible softness. The hair on my arms and chest receded, vanishing as if it had never been. My body hair was just gone. In its place was smooth, sensitive skin that seemed to register the slightest change in air temperature. The changes accelerated. My shoulders felt like they were being squeezed, narrowing and losing their broad, masculine set. My hair was growing. I could feel it, an unnerving tickle as it spilled down my neck and past my shoulders. The process was a symphony of alien sensations, a complete and total violation of everything I knew my body to be. I was a passenger, trapped inside a vessel that was being systematically unmade and remade into something else. Panic, raw and primal, clawed at my sanity. After what felt like an eternity, the intense physical sensations began to subside, leaving behind a dull, full-body ache and a profound sense of exhaustion. The sedative was wearing off. The restraints clicked open. "It's done," Heiress said. "Go ahead. Stand up slowly." My legs felt like jelly. I pushed myself up, my balance completely off. My center of gravity had shifted. I felt shorter, lighter, more delicate. My own hands, when I looked at them, were slender and small, with long, graceful fingers and unblemished skin. I touched my face. It was smooth, soft, the familiar rough texture of stubble completely gone. The cheekbones were higher, the chin more pointed. "The mirror is over there," Heiress said, gesturing to the far wall. My legs trembled as I walked, each step a discovery. My hips swayed with a natural, fluid motion that I wasn't creating. It was just how this new body moved. I felt a light bounce in my chest with each step, a sensation so foreign it made me dizzy. I stood before the full-length mirror, my heart hammering against my ribs, and I stared. The person looking back at me was not Jake. It was a girl. It was Willow. My hair was a cascade of honey blonde waves that fell to the middle of my back. My eyes were the same color, but they seemed larger, framed by long, dark lashes. My lips were fuller. My neck was a slender column. I was wearing only my baggy boxer shorts, which now hung ridiculously on my narrower hips. Below them, my legs were long, toned, and completely smooth, and on my chest were two small, perfectly formed breasts, sensitive and new. I reached up and touched the face in the mirror, my slender fingers tracing the curve of a jaw that was not mine. The reflection did the same. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the voice that emerged was a stranger's. This isn't me," I whispered. The sound was light, melodic, with a breathy quality I'd never heard before. It sent a fresh wave of shock through me. Hearing that voice come from my own throat was somehow more jarring than seeing the new face. I ran my hands down my body, the narrow waist, the gentle curve of my hips, the unbelievable softness of my skin. I was trapped. This wasn't a disguise. This was a new reality. A raw, guttural sob of despair and confusion tore its way out of my new throat. I stumbled back from the mirror, shaking uncontrollably. The female technician approached me, her face still impassive. She held out a small pile of neatly folded clothes. "You need to get dressed," she said, her voice flat. "These are Willow's measurements." In her hands were a pair of pale pink lace panties, a matching bra, a simple white crop top, and a light blue denim skirt. I stared at the items as if they were venomous snakes. The bra, in particular, seemed like an instrument of alien torture. My hands shook as I took them. In the stark privacy of a small adjoining room, I pulled off my boxers, the last remnant of my old self. The sight of my transformed body was still a punch to the gut. I was smooth, curved, and completely female. I picked up the panties. The silk felt impossibly soft against my fingertips. I stepped into them, the delicate fabric clinging to my new curves. It felt wrong, intrusive. Then came the bra. I looked at the complicated mess of straps and hooks. Utterly baffled, I had unhooked a few in my time, always from the back, always with a confident flourish. Now, faced with putting one on, I was a clumsy child. I fumbled with it, trying to hook it from the back, my arms twisting at an unnatural angle. Finally, in frustration, I hooked it in the front and spun it around, pulling the straps over my shoulders as I'd seen in movies. The feeling of the underwire pressing against my ribs and the soft cups encasing my new breasts was the strangest sensation of all. It was confining, yet supportive. It was a constant, physical reminder of the change. Every breath I took, I could feel it there. I pulled the crop top over my head. It settled just above my navel, exposing a sliver of my soft midriff. The denim skirt was next. It zipped up the side, hugging my hips and flaring out slightly around my thighs. I was dressed. I was a girl. I walked back out and stood before the mirror again. The stranger was still there, but now she was clothed. She looked like any other 19-year-old girl on a summer day. Pretty, carefree, normal. But inside, I was a 39-year-old man screaming into the void. I looked into my own, alien eyes in the reflection, my new, soft lips parted. "This is me," I whispered, and the girl in the mirror whispered it back. The week that followed was the most disorienting, humiliating, and transformative period of my life. I was moved from the sterile lab to a secluded training facility, a high-tech finishing school designed to turn a grizzled spy into a believable teenage heiress. My primary instructor was a woman named Evelyn Reed. She was a former deep-cover agent herself, sharp, observant, and possessed of zero patience for my masculine tendencies. "You walk like a dock worker, Jake," she said on the first day. Her arms crossed as she watched me clomp across the polished floor of the training room. Your shoulders are back. You lead with your chest, and your stride is too long. A girl like Willow walks from her hips. It's a different center of gravity. Everything flows. She handed me a pair of shoes. They were 3-inch wedge sandals. Innocent looking, but, as I would soon discover, instruments of pure agony. Put them on, she commanded. I sat and struggled with the delicate straps. My feet, now a dainty size 7, felt lost in them. When I stood, my ankles wobbled like a newborn foal's. I took one step and immediately pitched forward, catching myself on a ballet bar that lined the wall. Again, Evelyn said, her voice devoid of sympathy. For hours, I did nothing but walk, up and down the room, my ankles screaming, the arches of my feet on fire. Evelyn would bark corrections. Smaller steps let your hips sway. Don't look at your feet. Shoulders relaxed. I stumbled. I tripped. I nearly twisted my ankle a dozen times. I felt clumsy, foolish, and deeply, deeply resentful. It wasn't just walking, it was everything. Sitting, for example. I had a habit of sitting with my legs spread slightly apart, a typical male posture. No, Evelyn snapped, slapping my knee. A lady crosses her legs, ankle over ankle for polite company, or knee over knee. It protects your modesty and creates a more elegant line. I tried it. It felt unnatural, restrictive. My body was a foreign country, and I didn't know any of the local customs. The vocal coaching was just as arduous. My new voice was naturally high and feminine, but my speech patterns were all wrong. I was clipped, direct, and used minimal inflection. My coach, a cheerful woman named Diane, made me practice singing scales and reciting tongue twisters. It's not just the pitch, it's the music, she'd say. You need to use more melody. Let your voice rise at the end of a question. Laugh from your chest, not a guttural bark. She made me practice laughing. I felt like an idiot, producing a series of forced, high-pitched ha-ha-has that sounded utterly fake, but slowly, painstakingly, I started to get it. I learned to soften the edges of my words, to smile when I spoke, to use my eyes to convey emotion. Then came the makeup. I sat at a vanity table littered with a bewildering array of brushes, powders, and potions. My instructor for this particular torture was a young, stylish woman named Chloe. Okay, so foundation is your base, she began, her own face a perfect canvas. You just want to even out your skin tone. Don't cake it on. My first attempt was a disaster. I squeezed out too much liquid foundation and ended up with a thick, pasty mask. I looked like a ghost. Chloe sighed and had me wash it all off. We moved on to mascara. I held the tiny, spiky wand with the same trepidation I'd once reserved for unstable explosives. I tried to apply it, blinked at the wrong moment, and jabbed myself directly in the eye. Tears streamed down my face, carrying black streaks of mascara with them. I looked like a raccoon who'd lost a fight. I threw the wand down in frustration. I can't do this, I snapped, my voice cracking with a very unwillow-like rage. This is ridiculous. I'm a spy, not a beauty pageant contestant. Chloe just calmly handed me a makeup wipe. Willow Von Hess would never go out without her mascara, she said simply. Try again. And so I did. Again and again. I learned the delicate flick of the wrist required for eyeliner, the art of blending eyeshadow, the precise application of lipstick within the lines of my new, fuller lips. Slowly, something began to shift inside me, the constant correction, the endless repetition. It was like a form of brainwashing. I started to internalize the lessons. I'd catch myself in a reflection and automatically check my posture. I'd answer a question from a trainer and hear the feminine lilt in my own voice. The line between Jake the agent and Willow the character was beginning to blur. There were moments, late at night, when the conflict inside me was a raging storm. I would stare at my reflection, at this beautiful girl staring back, and feel a profound sense of loss. Jake was disappearing. His walk, his voice, his habits. They were all being systematically erased and overwritten with new programming. I felt like I was losing myself. But there were other moments too. Quiet, confusing moments. One afternoon, after successfully applying a full face of makeup, I looked in the mirror and was genuinely startled. The girl looking back was pretty, genuinely pretty. My blue eyes, now expertly framed with a subtle, smoky eyeshadow and mascara, looked huge and expressive. The soft pink lipstick made my lips look inviting. For a fleeting second, I felt a flicker of something that wasn't shame or anger. It was a strange, unfamiliar flutter of appreciation. I felt a blush rise in my cheeks, a sensation I hadn't experienced in 20 years. The final night at the facility, Evelyn came to my room. I was packed and ready for the mission. She handed me a simple, silk nightgown. "You'll be sleeping on the jet tomorrow night," she said. "You need to be in character from the moment you step out this door. No more Jake." I nodded, my throat tight. After she left, I changed into the nightgown. The silk was cool and incredibly soft against my skin, draping over my body in a way that made me acutely aware of every new curve. I sat on the edge of the bed, the fabric pooling around my smooth legs. I looked at myself in the full-length mirror on the wardrobe door. The girl in the reflection looked soft, vulnerable, and a little sad. She was wearing a pale lavender nightgown. Her blonde hair was brushed out and shining under the soft lamplight, and her bare feet were tucked neatly under the bed. She looked nothing like a hardened field agent. She looked like Willow. A single thought, clear and cold, cut through the confusion in my mind. "Tomorrow," I whispered, and the girl in the mirror whispered it with me, her voice a soft, silken echo. "Tomorrow, I won't be Jake anymore. I'll be her." The operation was executed with chilling efficiency, while I was being transformed. Another team had placed the real Willow Von Hess under surveillance. The morning of her flight, they staged a minor, convincing car accident. She was taken to a private clinic controlled by the agency, where she would be kept comfortable, sedated, and completely unaware until my mission was over. I, on the other hand, was driven to a private airfield in a Blacktown car. I was now fully Willow. I wore a chic but comfortable travel outfit that had been painstakingly selected, a cream-colored cashmere sweater, designer jeans that hugged my new hips perfectly, and a pair of fashionable white sneakers. A simple gold locket, a replica of Willow's favorite, rested in the hollow of my throat. My long, blonde hair was tied back in a loose, elegant ponytail. Every head turned as I walked across the tarmac toward the gleaming white private jet. The crew was lined up at the base of the stairs, a pilot, a co-pilot, and a flight attendant. They all smiled warmly at me. "Welcome back, Miss Von Hess," the pilot said, his eyes crinkling. "We trust your year of studies was a success." "It was wonderful. Thank you, Captain," I replied, my voice light and airy. The words felt practiced, but they came out smoothly. My heart was pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was the first test. These people knew Willow. One wrong move, one misplaced word, and it was all over. The flight attendant, a sharp-looking woman in her 30s named Petra, stepped forward. "It is so good to see you, Willow. Your father has been counting the minutes." She gave me a brief, one-armed hug. I stiffened for a microsecond before forcing myself to relax and return the gesture. Her perfume was strong, a floral scent that was almost overwhelming. The brief physical contact sent a jolt of panic through me. It felt too intimate, too familiar. "I've missed him too," I said, forcing a bright smile. I boarded the jet, and the sheer opulence of it was staggering. Cream leather seats, polished mahogany trim, and gold-plated fixtures. It was a flying palace. I took the seat Petra indicated, sinking into the buttery leather. I automatically went across my legs man-style, ankle on knee. Before catching myself, with a jolt, I corrected, smoothly crossing my legs at the knee as Evelyn had drilled into me. The simple movement felt surprisingly natural now. As the jet taxied and took off, Petra fussed over me, bringing me a glass of sparkling water with a slice of lime and a cashmere blanket for my lap. She chattered on about people I'd never met and events I knew nothing about. And you will not believe what happened at the St. Moritz gala. Isabel showed up in the exact same Dior gown as Baroness von Kleist. It was a complete disaster. I had to rely on my spy training, reading her expressions, giving non-committal but enthusiastic responses, and asking vague questions to keep her talking. "Oh no, how mortifying for her," I'd say, widening my eyes. "What did she do?" It was exhausting, a high-wire act of social deception. I felt like a fraud, a cheap imitation, and the fear of being exposed was a constant, cold knot in my stomach. After an hour or so, Petra left me to rest. The moment I was alone, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I leaned my head back against the soft leather and closed my eyes. The gentle hum of the engines was a soothing drone. I could feel the fine cashmere of my sweater against my skin, the slight pressure of the locket against my collarbone. These were Willow sensations. Were they becoming mine? Later, I excused myself to the private lavatory at the back of the plane. It was larger than my first apartment, with a marble vanity and gold-plated taps. I locked the door and leaned against it, my reflection staring back at me from a large, well-lit mirror. The girl in the mirror looked calm, poised, and impossibly wealthy. She didn't look like someone whose entire identity was a lie. I took off the sneakers, which felt blessedly comfortable, and stood on the plush carpeting in my bare feet. I looked down at my legs, at the smooth, pale skin. I wiggled my toes, which were adorned with a coat of pale pink polish I didn't remember getting. Of course, the prep team had thought of everything. It was in these small details that the reality of my situation truly hit me. This wasn't just a physical change. They had stolen a girl's life, and I was the thief wearing her skin. I felt a pang of guilt, sharp and unexpected. To distract myself, I began to explore the role more deeply. I opened the vanity. It was stocked with Willow's preferred brands of makeup and skincare. I picked up a tube of her lip gloss, a shimmery peach color. On impulse, I applied a little to my lips. It was sticky and sweet. I looked at myself again. The gloss made my lips look fuller, wetter. It was a subtle change, but it made me look even more feminine, even younger. A strange thought surfaced. Unbidden, it's not so bad. I crushed it immediately. This was a mission, a disguise. It meant nothing. I was Jake. I had to remember that. I splashed some cold water on my face, careful not to smudge the waterproof mascara. When I returned to my seat, I found I was starting to adapt. The initial terror was being replaced by the familiar focus of a deep cover op. I wasn't Jake pretending to be Willow anymore. For the duration of this flight, for the duration of this mission, I was Willow. My survival depended on it. The hours passed. I read a fashion magazine, listened to some pop music on the provided noise-canceling headphones, and even managed to doze off for a while. When I woke, the sun was setting, painting the clouds outside my window in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful. Petra appeared at my side. "We'll be landing in an hour, miss. Your father is waiting for you at the estate." The knot of fear in my stomach tightened again, colder than before. The crew was one thing. A father would know, wouldn't he? I just nodded and gave her a smile I hoped looked more confident than I felt. As the plane began its descent into Germany, I looked out the window at the darkening landscape below. I was descending into the lion's den, and I was disguised as his favorite cub. The von Hess estate was less a house and more a modern-day castle, a sprawling complex of glass and steel nestled in the heart of the Black Forest. Klaus von Hess was waiting for me as the car pulled up. He was a tall, imposing man with silver hair and eyes as cold and gray as a winter sky. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the final exam. He opened the car door for me himself. I stepped out, forcing my body to remain relaxed and open. "Willow," he said, his voice a deep baritone. It held a warmth that was completely at odds with his icy gaze. "Papa," I breathed, the name feeling alien on my tongue. He pulled me into a hug. It was stiff, formal, but I could feel the tension in his arms. I buried my face in his expensive wool coat. which smelled of cedar and cigar smoke, and prayed he wouldn't feel the frantic beating of my heart. He held me at arm's length, his eyes scanning my face. It was the longest 10 seconds of my life. "You look tired from the journey," he finally said, his expression softening almost imperceptibly, "but beautiful. It is good to have you home." I had passed. The relief was so overwhelming I almost sagged against him. The technology was better than they'd promised. I was, for all intents and purposes, his daughter. The next few days were a blur of settling in and playing the part of the adoring child. I had a wing of the house to myself, with a bedroom the size of a tennis court and a closet filled with more clothes than I had ever owned in my entire life. Every morning, a maid would lay out an outfit for me: silken blouses, tailored trousers, delicate summer dresses. Getting dressed was a ritual, a daily donning of my costume. I grew accustomed to the feel of soft fabrics against my skin, the slight pinch of a cinched waist, the delicate click of a bracelet against my wrist. The primary mission objective was to locate Klaus's study and access his computer systems, but he was cautious. The study was always locked, and he was rarely far from it. I knew I needed an opportunity, a distraction. It came a week after my arrival, in the form of the annual Von Hess Summer Gala. It was a massive affair, with hundreds of Europe's elite descending upon the estate. For this event, a personal stylist was brought in to prepare me. I was zipped into a gown of midnight blue silk that left my shoulders and back bare. It flowed like water, whispering against my skin with every movement. My hair was swept up into an intricate twist, with a few loose tendrils framing my face. They put diamonds in my ears and a matching necklace that felt cold against my warm skin. The final touch was a pair of silver stiletto heels that added 4 inches to my height and made my legs look impossibly long. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't recognize the person staring back. This wasn't Jake, and it wasn't even the casual girl-next-door Willow. This was a princess, an heiress, a work of art, and for the first time, the admiration I felt wasn't fleeting or confused. It was a clear, sharp pang of pride. I looked stunning. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. The gala was a chaotic swirl of champagne, classical music, and polite, predatory smiles. I was on Klaus's arm for the first hour, being introduced to bankers, politicians, and aristocrats. I was an accessory, a beautiful testament to his legacy. "Your daughter is a vision, Klaus," a portly man with a thick mustache declared, kissing my hand. I resisted the urge to snatch it back. "She is, isn't she?" Klaus said, his voice brimming with paternal pride. It was sickening, and yet a part of me preened under the attention. Compliments, which would have made Jake the agent deeply uncomfortable, landed on Willow the heiress like a soft blanket. I found myself smiling, blushing, and murmuring "thank you" with a demure tilt of my head. The role was becoming second nature. Eventually, Klaus was drawn into a deep conversation with a group of men who practically radiated menace. This was my chance. I excused myself, claiming a need for fresh air. As I navigated the crowded ballroom, a young man stepped into my path. He was handsome in a clean-cut, boyish way, with sandy hair and a charming, easy smile. He was one of Willow's childhood friends, someone I'd been briefed on: Liam Sterling, the son of a British diplomat. "Willow," he said, his eyes lighting up, "you look, wow, absolutely breathtaking." "Liam," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. "It's good to see you. You're looking very dapper yourself." "Dance with me?" he asked, extending a hand. My mind screamed no. It was a distraction. It was dangerous, but declining would be suspicious. A girl like Willow would never turn down a dance with a handsome friend. "I'd love to," I said, placing my slender hand in his. He led me to the dance floor as the orchestra swelled into a waltz. He placed one hand on my bare back, the other holding mine. His touch was warm and firm. My skin tingled where he held me. As he guided me into the steps, I was grateful for Evelyn's brutal training. My body remembered the movements. My feet, even in the killer heels, were light and sure. We spun and swayed to the music, a whirlwind of silk and sound. Liam held me closer than was strictly proper, His clean, citrusy cologne filling my senses. He looked down at me, his gaze intense. "I missed you this year," he said, his voice low. "I missed you too." I lied, my heart doing a strange, unfamiliar flutter. It wasn't the pounding of fear or adrenaline I was used to. It was something else, a nervous, pleasant thrill. I was in the arms of a handsome man, my soft body moving in time with his, surrounded by beauty and music. In that moment, the lines blurred completely. There was no mission, no Jake. There was only the dance, the feeling of being graceful, of being desired, of being a woman. It was intoxicating, and it scared me more than any bullet I'd ever dodged. The dance ended, but he didn't let go immediately. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. "Don't be a stranger now that you're back," he whispered. I pulled away gently, my cheeks flushed. "I won't," I promised. I excused myself and hurried away. My composure rattled. I needed to refocus. As I moved through the throng, I finally saw my opportunity. Klaus was gone from his group, and the door to his study, at the far end of the hall, was momentarily unguarded. I slipped away from the party, my heart pounding for an entirely different reason now. This was it. I was a spy again. But as I picked the high-tech lock on the study door, the phantom sensation of Liam's hand on my back lingered. A ghost of a life I was only pretending to live. After the party, long after I had successfully downloaded the incriminating files from Klaus's computer and retreated to my room, I stood in front of the mirror. The diamonds were gone, the intricate hairdo was undone, and the magnificent gown was pooled on the floor. I was just me, Willow. I touched my face, my shoulders, my waist. My body felt different after the dance, more alive, more mine. A terrifying question echoed in the silent, luxurious room. Am I still Jake? The 2 days after the gala were a tense, quiet waiting game. I had the data-encrypted transaction records, satellite schematics, communication logs, everything the agency needed. I had transmitted it through a secure burst device hidden in a tube of lipstick. Now, all I could do was maintain my cover as Willow and wait for the extraction signal. The waiting was the hardest part. With the primary objective complete, the adrenaline of the mission faded, leaving a vacuum that was quickly filled by a rising tide of confusion. I spent my time reading by the pool, taking walks in the forest, and enduring painfully stilted dinners with Klaus, who was becoming increasingly agitated, clearly sensing that his deal was on the verge of collapse. My interactions with him were a masterclass in playing the innocent, doting daughter. I'd ask him if he was okay, tell him he looked stressed, and offer to have the cook make his favorite meal. He would just pat my head and tell me not to worry about it. His eyes distant, he saw me as a child, a pretty decoration in his life, and that ignorance was my shield. The real complication was Liam. He took my polite promise not to be a stranger seriously. He called the next day and invited me out for a drive. Declining would have been strange for Willow, who, according to her social media history, had a soft spot for him. So, I agreed. He picked me up in a vintage convertible, a classic silver Mercedes. I wore a simple white sundress and sunglasses, my blonde hair whipping around my face in the wind as we sped down winding country roads. It felt normal, frighteningly normal. We didn't talk about business or politics. We talked about music, movies, and ridiculous memories from a childhood that wasn't mine. I found myself laughing, a real genuine laugh that bubbled up from my chest, light and effortless. The sound of it surprised me. He took me to a small, secluded lake. We sat on a wooden dock, dangling our feet in the cool water. My bare legs were next to his, the contrast of my smooth, pale skin and his tanned, muscled leg was stark. "You seem different," he said, looking at me, his expression serious for the first time, "since you got back from the States." My blood ran cold. "Different how so?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "I don't know," he mused, squinting at the horizon, more calm, more present. The old Willow was always so frantic, so worried about what everyone thought of her. You seem more comfortable in your own skin." His words were a gut punch. He thought I was an improved version of the real Willow. The irony was suffocating. I, a 39-year-old man, was doing a better job of being a 19-year-old girl than she was. "Maybe I just grew up a little," I said, the lie tasting sour. We drove back as the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape. When he dropped me off at the estate, he walked me to the door. Under the soft light of the porch lamp, he turned to me. "I had a really nice time today." "Willow," he said, his voice soft. "Me too, Liam," I replied, and I was shocked to find I wasn't lying. He leaned in slowly, his intention clear. My training screamed at me, neutralize, deflect, escape. But my body was frozen. His face was inches from mine. I could see the flecks of green in his brown eyes, smell the faint scent of sunshine on his skin. My heart was hammering. A wild bird trapped in my chest. He was going to kiss me. And a strange, treacherous part of me wanted him to. The thought was so shocking, so utterly alien, that it broke the spell. I turned my head at the last second, and his lips brushed against my cheek instead of my mouth. It was a soft, warm pressure that sent a shiver down my spine. He pulled back, a flicker of disappointment in his eyes, but he covered it with a smile. "Good night, Willow." "Good night, Liam," I whispered, then quickly turned and fled inside, my cheeks burning with a deep, confusing blush. I leaned against the heavy oak door, my entire body trembling. That had been too close, not just to breaking cover, but to breaking something inside myself. The Jake part of me was horrified, disgusted. An agent doesn't get emotionally compromised, but the Willow part, the part that had been growing stronger every day, felt a pang of regret. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the massive canopy bed, tangled in silk sheets, my mind racing. What was happening to me? The mission was supposed to be about deception, but the biggest deception was the one I was playing on myself. I was starting to feel as Willow. I enjoyed the swish of a skirt against my legs. I found a strange satisfaction in styling my hair just right. I felt a thrill when Liam looked at me. Was I going insane, or was the biological transformation more than just skin deep? Had it rewired my brain, my emotions, my very desires? I thought about my old life, the beige office, the cold coffee, the crushing loneliness. The life of Jake had been an empty shell. This life, Willow's life, was a lie, a complete fabrication, but it was filled with sensations, with emotions, with beauty and connection. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. The question wasn't just whether I could go back. The question, the one that kept me awake all night, was whether I even wanted to. The signal came the next morning. It was a simple coded message embedded in a spam email. "Your package is ready for delivery." It meant the international warrants were signed, and a joint task force was preparing to raid the estate within the next 12 hours. My extraction window was now. A wave of relief washed over me, immediately followed by a surprising and unwelcome surge of panic. It was over. I was going home. I was going to be Jake again. The thought should have been a comfort. Instead, it felt like a death sentence. My instructions were to pack an overnight bag, dress for travel, and walk to a service entrance on the far side of the estate at precisely 2:00 p.m. A car would be waiting. I moved like an automaton, my mind a blank haze of conflict. I went to the closet, a vast walk-in space filled with a rainbow of designer clothes. My hand hovered over the dresses, the silk blouses, the soft cashmere sweaters. These clothes had become a second skin, a costume that had somehow merged with the actor. I chose a simple pair of dark jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a leather jacket. It felt like the closest I could get to my old self, a futile act of rebellion against the girl I had become. As I dressed, every sensation was magnified. The rough texture of the denim felt abrasive against my soft skin, so different from the gentle caress of a skirt. I felt clumsy and awkward, my movements constrained. I looked in the mirror. The girl staring back at me looked like she was in costume, a tomboy affectation. It didn't look like me. The thought was chilling. I packed a small bag with the bare essentials, my hands moving mechanically. My eyes fell on the jewelry box on my dresser. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was the locket I'd worn on the plane. On impulse, I picked it up and fastened it around my neck. The cool metal felt familiar against my skin, a keepsake from a life I never lived. At 1:55 p.m., I walked out of my room for the last time. The house was quiet. Klaus was locked in his study, making frantic phone calls. I crept down the grand staircase, my sneakers silent on the thick carpet. Every step was a farewell. Goodbye to the sun-drenched atrium. Goodbye to the ridiculous, opulent art. Goodbye to the gilded cage I had started to call home. As I passed the ballroom, the memory of the dance with Liam hit me with the force of a physical blow. The music, the feel of his hand on my back, the confusing, exhilarating flutter in my chest. I would never feel that again. As Jake, I was a ghost. As Willow, for a brief, shining moment, I had been real. The service entrance was down a long, sterile corridor. It felt like I was walking back toward the annex, back toward the beige emptiness of my old life. The air grew colder. My steps faltered. Did I have to go? The thought was pure insanity. I was a government agent. I had a duty. This was the mission. But the mission was over. What happened next? I could just disappear. I had the face and identity of a billionaire's daughter. I could vanish into Europe, start a new life. A life where I could wear beautiful dresses and feel the sun on my bare legs. A life where a handsome man might look at me with warmth in his eyes. A life that wasn't Jake's. My hand was on the doorknob. Outside, my old life was waiting. My finger trembled. I pulled the door open. The car was there, a nondescript black sedan. The back door opened and Evelyn Reed looked out, her expression as stern as ever. "Get in, Jake," she said. Her voice was a splash of cold water, a brutal reminder of who I was. Jake. I hesitated for one last, agonizing second. Then my training, my discipline, the deeply ingrained habits of a lifetime, took over. I got in the car. The door shut with a solid, final thud. The drive was silent. I stared out the window as the Von Hess estate, my fantasy castle, grew smaller and smaller until it was swallowed by the forest. Evelyn didn't speak, for which I was grateful. I had no words. I felt hollowed out, a vessel emptied of its contents. We arrived at a small, private airfield, the same one I'd left a lifetime ago. A sleek agency jet was waiting. Inside, Dr. Heiress Thorne was prepping a medical station. He smiled his cold, scientific smile. "Welcome back, Agent," he said. "The procedure was a complete success. The data you acquired was perfect." He held up a syringe filled with a clear, viscous fluid. "The counteragent, as promised, and," he said, "this will initiate the reversion. It will be much faster than the initial transformation. You'll feel some discomfort, some flu-like symptoms, but within 24 hours, you'll be back to your baseline." He was offering me myself back, my real face, my real body, my real voice, everything I had thought I wanted. I looked down at my hands, the slender, graceful hands of a girl. I touched the locket at my throat. I could feel the soft weight of my long hair on my shoulders. I thought of Liam's smile, of the swish of a silk gown, of the surprising joy in a genuine, melodic laugh. I was being offered a choice. The jet was in the air, a silver bullet cutting through the clouds, taking me further and further away from Germany, from Willow. The cabin was pressurized and quiet, the silence broken only by the hum of the engines. Heiress Thorne had placed the syringe with the counteragent on a small, sterile tray on the table in front of me. It sat there, gleaming under the cabin lights, a promise and a threat. "Whenever you're ready," he said, before retreating to the cockpit to give me privacy. I was alone with the girl in the window's reflection. She looked pale and lost, her large blue eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't name. Fear, sadness, regret, all of them. I picked up the syringe. It felt heavy in my delicate hand. A tool of unmaking, one injection. That's all it would take to kill Willow, to erase her from existence. The aches and pains would come, the strange internal shifts. My voice would deepen and crack. My skin would roughen. My hair would recede. The soft curves of my body would melt away, replaced by the hard, familiar angles of a man nearly twice her age. I would become Jake again. And what would Jake have a commendation? Probably a quiet, well done from direct to thorn, and then back to the records annex, back to the beige walls, the humming lights, the soul-crushing boredom, back to being invisible, back to a life devoid of color, of sensation, of connection, a life where no one would ever look at me the way Liam had, where I would never again feel the simple, profound grace of a body that moved with effortless beauty. Was that a victory? To save the world only to return to a life that felt like a prison? This mission had been the most terrifying, humiliating, and violating experience of my life, but it had also been the most alive I had ever felt. I had been forced to pay attention to things Jake had never noticed: the texture of fabric, the scent of perfume, the subtle shift in an expression, the warmth of a hand. I had lived a life of heightened sensation, of emotion, of vulnerability. To become Willow had been to lose myself, but maybe the man I was, Jake, was someone worth losing. I held the syringe up to the light. The liquid inside was crystal clear, sterile, and absolute. It was the cure. It was the poison. My thumb moved to the plunger. I thought about the future. What would happen to Willow if I stayed? The real Willow von Hess would eventually be released. Her memory of the accident wiped and replaced. She would return to her life. But I could be a new Willow. The agency would disavow me. Of course, I would be a ghost, a rogue element. I would have no support, no backup. I would have to survive on my own. A woman with the mind of a spy, in a world that would see me as nothing more than a pretty face. It would be dangerous. It would be difficult. It would be a constant struggle. But it would be a life, a real one. My fingers trembled. The reflection in the window watched me, her expression unreadable. She was waiting for my decision. Was she my mask, or had she become my face? I looked from the syringe in my hand to the girl in the reflection. For the first time, I didn't see a stranger. I didn't see a disguise or a mission or a scientific experiment. I saw myself. Slowly, deliberately, I placed the syringe back on the tray. I didn't push it away. I didn't throw it. I just left it there. A choice made. For now. An option left open. For later. I unclasped the locket from around my neck. I opened it. It was empty. A blank space waiting to be filled. I closed it, the metal warm from my skin, and slipped it into my pocket. My name is Jake. I was a spy. I was a man. My name is Willow, and my story is just beginning.